G'day friends, Grant Lavac here from the Unexplained Rundown. It's a real thrill to be with you today, and I truly appreciate you choosing to attend this presentation. It's a true honor to be presenting at the inaugural Anomicon virtual conference this year alongside so many wonderful presenters and podcasters that I respect and have had the good opportunity and fortune of learning from directly, and many of them that I call friends. So, and a quick kudos to Ryan Sprague and his team for working tirelessly to put this event on. I have no doubt it's been a huge lift to get it to where it is today. So I take my hat off to you, Ryan, and your team, and hope that you'll enjoy a couple pints of Scottish ale when it's all said and done. So, some of you watching this presentation today may already be well versed in the UAP topic and kind of have a sense as to what's been happening on the international stage. So if that's you, my apologies in advance if this video is a little bit basic or boring. But if you're new to the UAP topic or you don't really know what is happening as it pertains to the UAP topic in other parts of the world, this video is a really good introduction for you. So it's designed to kind of give you a sense as to UAP in an Australian context. And for that very reason, I've titled this presentation today, Australia and UAPs, Past, Present, and Future. Now, we could spend an entire hour or two really reviewing Australia's history on the UAP topic. So allow me just to kind of give you an abbreviated version at the front end. So we'll kick things off with looking at Australia's history with the UAP topic. So we'll focus on the past. A couple of visuals that will hopefully make this a little easier to digest as we go through. So Australia has really almost as long of a history investigating the UAP topic as it does the United States. Point in fact, the term unidentified aerial phenomena is not a new term. It's actually been used, it was used quite frequently historically in Australia. And this particular document from the Department of Civil Aviation, which is now the CASA, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, they were using the term unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, as far back as 1959. So Australia's history on this topic almost dates back as far as that of the Roswell days. It was really in the early 1950s that Australia started to really take this topic seriously. Following obviously the Washington D.C. flap of, I think it was 1952. So round about that time, shortly after Roswell, that's when Australia started to take the topic quite seriously. And there have been, like the US, there have been a number of top secret, highly classified military installations in Australia over the years that have incurred a lot of sightings. And one of them is called Woomera, which is located in South Australia. There is a document that is available in the National Archives of Australia. It's a 28-page document titled Unusual Occurrences Flying Saucer at Woomera, and it contains various reports of anomalous craft observed at Woomera in the 1950s and in the 60s. And it was really in the early 1950s and 60s that the long-range weapons establishment at Woomera in South Australia was operated then under the now defunct Department of Supply, and was home to top secret research into guided missile technology, where countless missile tests and trials were performed. And in January 1955, it became known as the Weapons Research Establishment, after an amalgamation between the Long Range Weapons Establishment and several other defense research facilities. It's been long known by many names over the years, essentially. And today, the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAAF, it is called essentially the RAAF Woomera Range Complex, the WRC, a major Australian military and civil aerospace facility and operation managed by the Royal Australian Air Force. The airspace above this facility is restricted and controlled by the RAF for safety and security reasons, and the base serves as a highly specialised Australian Defence Force test and evaluation capability for the purposes of testing defence material. So a lot of the cases that were reported in the 50s and 60s, reports of strange lights in the sky, anomalous objects, displaying unusual flight characteristics that could not be reconciled by the observers at the time. While I have no doubt that a lot of the observations can be attributed to prosaic explanations, the cases that were reported at this military installation, Woomera, in the 50s and 60s, many of them remain unsolved to this very day. There was also a site called Maralinga. Now, Maralinga, between 1956 and 1963, the United Kingdom conducted 7 nuclear tests at the Maralinga site in South Australia. It's part of the Woomera protected area, about 800 kilometres from northwest of Adelaide. Now, during those years, like with Woomera, there were numerous reports of anomalous objects and strange lights in the sky. And, with reports of UAPs being observed at, nuclear missile silos and military installations over the years, particularly, we know of several instances in the United States, Maelstrom obviously in the mid-60s, it really therefore comes as no surprise that there would be sightings at comparable bases in Australia. Woomera was just one of several top secret military installations that have produced reports of UAP, as I mentioned, but there have been other military installations as well. There was also the top secret Harold E. Holt base on the Northwest Cape Peninsula in Western Australia, as well as, and quite possibly the most well-known military installation in Australia, the top secret joint US-Australian satellite surveillance base and Australian Earth Station, referred to as Pine Gap in the Northern Territory. Both Harold E. Holt Base and Pine Gap are actually covered frequently in Ross Coulthart's book, which is essential reading. And, there is even reference, this one in particular, page, I believe it's 69 of In Plain Sight, that, Ross has spoken with both current and former members of the Australian Defence Force that have reported anomalous objects hovering over, these military sites, including Pine Gap. Now, many of them don't want to officially go on the record and report that information to their higher-ups out of still this fear of stigma, and they don't want to have a blemish on their record, which is unfortunate that they don't get it on the record, but it is encouraging that there are people that are prepared to come forward and reveal what they saw to folks like Ross Coulthart. They trust him as an individual that's not going to reveal their identity. He will maintain their anonymity and respect their privacy and protect them as a valuable source. So why do I mention all of this about these historical sightings at these military installations in Australia? Well, there was a formal policy that was put in place by the Air Force between the early 1950s and 1993. A small part of the role of a number of Royal Australian Air Force, RAF intelligence officers, was to receive and process reports of unusual aerial sightings. That's the vernacular that Australia was using in the decades past. We didn't go off flying saucers or unidentified flying objects. UAS, unusual aerial sightings, was the terminology of the day. And there was a formal policy in place, but for many, many decades. But in December of 1993, the Royal Australian Air Force Chief of Air Staff, which is the equivalent, CAS, which is the equivalent of the Chief of Air Force, the CAF today, he reviewed the unusual aerial sightings policy, and following a recommendation that was made in that document, ascertained that on consideration of the scientific record, or consideration of the scientific record suggests that whilst not all UAS have a ready explanation, there is no compelling reason for the RAF to continue to devote resources to recording, investigating, and attempting to explain them. Well, wouldn't the compelling reason be the fact that you can't explain away all of the reports of UAS? I mean, it sounds like that would be enough of a compelling reason for you to take UAP seriously. Wouldn't you be concerned about what happens, unexplained objects operating with impunity in civil and potentially restricted airspace? Wouldn't you want to know of a domain awareness gap? Wouldn't you want to address any domain awareness gap? And we've seen this time and time again with the commentary that's come out of the United States in the last 12, 24 months. And we'll talk about that more in today's presentation. But that was really the line that, the line that was drawn with this policy recommendation made in 1993, which then in 1996, this policy was put into effect. The Royal Australian Air Force ceased its investigation into unusual aerial sightings because they apparently could not find any compelling or other scientific reason to continue to devote resources to the reporting and recording of UAP or UAS. Quite the stark contrast and puzzling contrast to the determination that our US ally and Five Eyes partner has made across the pond that UAP pose a national security threat and safety of flight risk. And we're going to get more into that in today's session. So let's move on away from the policy change, recommendation and change that was made in 1996, because Australia has, again, like I said, almost as long as a history investigating the UAP topic as the United States. And there were certainly some very intelligent and highly credentialed individuals that were tasked with investigating the UAP topic and taking a scientific approach, giving it applying the scrutiny and respect that it deserved to try and understand from a scientific standpoint the nature and extent of UAP. This gentleman that you can see on screen, his name is O.H. Turner, or what he went by, Harry Turner. He was an Australian nuclear scientist, and he was tasked with, he investigated the UAP issue, essentially from 1948 and spanning several decades thereafter. So he investigated a lot of the case reports and sightings. He really wanted to take a scientific approach to better understanding the nature and extent of UAP, and he submitted an official report to the Directorate of Air Force Intelligence, DAFI, I believe it was called, the intelligence arm of the Air Force. And his report was downplayed by the then Air Force due to its, his supporting views of Donald Kehoe, who we know was responsible in the Project Blue Book days of investigating UFOs, UAP in the United States. And because his work, Donald Kehoe's work, alluded to there being a possible extraterrestrial explanation for UFOs, because Harry Turner referenced or was seen to have support or at least recognized Donald Kehoe's views in his report. Unfortunately, sadly, Harry Turner's work and recommendations that the UAP topic deserve greater scrutiny and scientific analysis, that scientific study be undertaken. His recommendations fell on deaf ears. So unfortunately, the immense work that Harry Turner put into investigating UAP in an Australian context didn't go anywhere. It fell on deaf ears. And there are a couple of researchers that have done some truly wonderful work on the UAP topic. So Keith Basterfield, who I've had the good fortune and pleasure and privilege of learning from directly and corresponding with directly, he authored a truly wonderful document that kind of categorized or collated all of the Australian government's record systems and looking at essentially what the Australian government did over the decades that it investigated UAS or unusual aerial sightings. It's a really interesting document, and I had a good look at it when I was first exploring what is Australia doing about UAPs. I thought it important to have a look at the historical record. So kudos to Keith Basterfield for spending countless hours documenting the Australian government's history with the UAS topic. Keith's not the only one. Bill Chalker has also done some wonderful work researching the UFO UAP topic in an Australian context, and he authored a book a number of years ago called the Oz Files, and he has a really great blog that goes by the same name, the Oz Files. Do have a look at it if you are interested to learn about Australia's history on this topic. Both Keith and Bill have a blog, and if you just search for their names in Google, it'll come up relatively quickly for you. So, in the research, which consider myself a curious citizen and really a novice researcher, in the research that I have undertaken to date, I've had again, as I said, good fortune and privilege to learn from both Keith and Bill directly, and I'm really just standing on the work of giants like them to uncover what I can to better understand Australia's involvement, or rather lack thereof, on this topic. So let's now explore the present day. So in October of 2021, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who's the current senator for the state of Tasmania, and sadly is still the only Australian senator that has had the courage and gumption to raise the issue of unidentified aerial, or now known as unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, in an Australian context. The only senator to ask questions and raise the issue in Parliament, which is incredibly unfortunate, but and I've had the good fortune and privilege of being able to engage with Senator Whish-Wilson and his office directly on this topic. But it is disappointing that other senators and members of Parliament are yet to take this topic seriously. So on the 27th of October of 2021, Senator Whish-Wilson pressed the then Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, on UAP in an Australian context, because earlier in that year, June of 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, released its preliminary assessment on UAP, and Senator Whish-Wilson had read that report and wanted to know, well, what is Australia doing about UAP? Is this something that we should be concerned about as a national security and safety of flight risk? And so rightly, and credit to him, he asked Mel Hupfield some important and pertinent questions. Fast forward, in July of 22, Robert Chipman was appointed or took over from Mel Hupfield as the Chief of Air Force. And on the 9th of November that year, Robert Chipman, the Chief of Air Force, was again pressed by Senator Whish-Wilson on UAP in an Australian context. So this brief video gives you a sense as to the line of questioning, the exchange that took place between Senator Whish-Wilson and the former Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, and the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman. So let me play this for you now, as it does provide a good look at those exchanges and will help give you a sense as to the mindset of the Royal Australian Air Force and Australian Department of Defence when it comes to the UAP issue.
My question relates to the, I know we have close ties with the US, we share intelligence. My questions relate to release of the report on the 25th of June 2021 by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Preliminary Assessments, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. This is an issue that has been raised in Congress. The Department of Defence has submitted a report. It's become a significant matter of public interest. And I suppose my first question is, are you aware of that report, Chief of Air Force?
I'm not formally aware of the report, but if I'm thinking there was an article in the newspapers, a commentary about that at some stage, but I'm not quite sure of the content of the report. Okay.
Just as a matter of interest, what questions did you think I was going to ask?
I thought you were going to ask some questions about aircraft. It sounds like you're going to ask questions about UFOs.
Well, we'd be very interesting to hear your views on this. Look, yes, it has been reported in the media extensively.
Could I just ask you, since you've taken over as Chief of Air Force, in what capacity, if any at all, have you been briefed on the UAP phenomena since you've taken over the role in July?
Senator, I haven't had any specific briefings in relation to UAP since I've taken over.
The report says UAPs clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. And then it goes on to talking about the 144 cases that the Pentagon looked at. Only one was clearly explainable, the others remain unexplained. They claim that after carefully considering the information, the task force reports that UAPs largely witnessed firsthand by military aviators and were collected from systems that were considered to be reliable, and that most reports describe these UAPs as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. Could I ask whether the Australian Air Force or the Australian military also has any task force looking at UAPs? Is this something that you're familiar with at all here in your brief?
I'm not familiar with nor have seen any reports or information regarding UAPs in an Australian airspace context, and there's no Air Force-led task force that looks into this phenomenon.
In 1996, the Air Force ceased handling reports on UAPs, determined there was no scientific or compelling reason to continue to devote resources to that investigation. On what basis are you aware of is there any documentation around the process that led the Air Force to move away from devoting resources to investigating?
There's no history of that, Senator.
As a pilot, have you seen any of the video footage that's been released by the US military?
Through professional curiosity, I did look at some of the videos that were attached to those media reports. They were interesting but not compelling to me, and I don't believe everything that I read in the media.
No.
Navy and Air Force crews now have a step-by-step reporting procedure on UAPs on their knee board in the cockpit and in their post-flight debrief procedures. Does that surprise you?
We've seen no reason why we would institute those measures in Australia.
Would you understand why they are implementing?
No, Senator.
Is there a reason you haven't had a discussion with our chief ally about why they're implementing those procedures? And
I was not aware of those procedures, Senator.
Basically, they're saying they can't explain what these things are, but they would like to better understand them.
Senator, I can't answer for another sovereign nation. That is a matter for the US and the Pentagon and the Department of the Defence in the US.
The Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Sprague, confirmed that since the release of this preliminary report in 2021, they now had 400 case reports they were considering. Most of them were for pilots like yourself. And he was quoted at those hearings as saying the US had brought many allies and international partners into their discussions on UAPs. Given how close we are to the US, has there been any discussions with Australian intelligence services or the Air Force in relation to their
I'm not aware
approach
of
to
any
this?
formal discussions that we've held with the US.
So that gives you a sense as to the current position of the Royal Australian Air Force and the Australian Department of Defence, which is incredibly frustrating knowing that our US ally and Five Eyes partner is taking this topic very seriously. It has bipartisan support. It is clearly a threat to national security and safety of flight. But don't take my word for it, because this brief video that I want to play for you really just highlights that, whilst Australia and the United States are the closest of allies, their positions on UAP really could not be further apart. And so let me show you this, because I think it really nails home the great divide that currently exists between the United States and Australia on this topic.
Based off of your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grush?
Fair assessment, yeah.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Grush?
Yes,
Fravor?
definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes, possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially. Yeah, I'd say definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Is, based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action.
Incursions in defence training ranges by unidentified objects, intrusions by unknown aircraft or objects would represent serious hazards to the safety of flight and potential threats to security of our operations. You've obviously got strategies in place to do that here. Are you aware of reports? I did raise this with the previous Air Marshal as well, of US military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
just so
classified
I'm
as
clear.
unidentified aerial phenomena. What do you think? Do you think it's funny?
Now, that at the end there, that was November of last year. That was the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong, and it just goes to show you that ignorance is bliss. There is still this ignorant position that's been taken by so many people in the Australian government, and really highlights that ridicule and stigma is alive and well when it comes to the UAP topic, which is incredibly unfortunate. With it clearly being a national security threat and safety of flight risk, for Australian elected officials to downplay and ridicule the topic like that, it's quite shameful. It's incredibly shameful. And just to kind of hit home that ridicule and stigma is alive and well, not just within elected politicians, but also sadly within the halls of the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force. And I'm not saying that's a blanket broad brushstroke of everyone. I respect the brave men and women that work in the Australian Defence Force, but unfortunately, there are a few that are in positions of leadership that are just not taking the topic seriously. So, and I'll give you a quick example. This was a FOIA document secured through the Freedom of Information Act request. This was an email from the Defence Space Command, the Defence Space Commander, a response on a document that she was cleared with the removal of redacted details of my phone number. At least remove the phone numbers. Otherwise, the UFO dude, and I suspect that's reference to me based on the number of Freedom of Information Act requests that I've submitted to the Royal Australian Air Force and Department of Defence. Otherwise, the UFO dude will be on the line. So they obviously are not happy with people engaging them on this topic because they feel it's just a waste of their time. And an even better example of that is, let's show you this particular, this was another email that was secured through the Freedom of Information Act request. It was an email directed to the head of Air Force capability. So all jokes aside, so they obviously had a bit of a running commentary that was what they thought humorous in this email chain. I think this might end up causing us some work. This was following, obviously, the revelations of the reports that were coming out of the United States and questions that were being asked of the Chief of Air Force at the Senate estimates. So the response to that email is, you're right, it may trigger more UFO-flavored interest. The truth is out there. I just need to determine if interest in this sci-fi is an HAC, Head of Air Force Capability, or CD, Space Command. So Commander of Space Defense Command, Defense Space Command Lead. So you can see just in the commentary that, the correspondence that's happening internally within defense leadership is pretty telling. They just do not want to take this topic seriously. They just want it to go away. Why they're not proactively getting in front of this topic and thinking, well, this is really an issue that our ally is concerned about. Maybe we need to be concerned about it as well as, as a domain awareness gap, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So let's use that as an opportunity to now pivot, and I'll show you a document that I was able to secure last year through the Freedom of Information Act. It's the most significant document as it pertains to the UAP topic that's come out of the Australian Department of Defence since that UAS policy document of 1993. So, in more than 25 years, it's the most significant document. And what's telling in the table of contents of this document is there's a section devoted to strategic narrative. So there is a story that the Royal Australian Air Force wants to tell when they're pressed on this issue or asked questions by the media. Strategic narrative. So UAP are likely to be, this is the determination of the Royal Australian Air Force, or the opinion of the author of this document has informed policy. UAP are likely to be one of three things: natural or other benign phenomena, whatever that is, anomalies with sensors, or human-made technologies. UAP could be other nation systems, either contemporary or advanced. So the question I have is, Royal Australian Air Force, how are you able to determine what UAP are likely to be or not likely to be when, number one, you haven't investigated UAP since 1996, Number two, you haven't been privy to any of the classified data that's housed within the classified reports that were provided to Congress. And number three, we know that you haven't been engaged by the United States on this topic, nor have you proactively reached out to your US counterparts to inquire, to be briefed formally by them on the UAP issue. And we know that's the case because you've just seen it in that video montage. And we know in this document, the United States nor any other nation or ally have requested or offered to collaborate on UAP reporting or investigation. Now, that was accurate as at the time of this document was authored. I've actually awaiting receipt of an updated version of this document. So once I receive it, I'll be able to push that information out in future videos that I do like this and on social media. But this is the telling one. Defense has no desire to seek collaboration on this issue. Why? The US, the United States Congress has legislated that the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, it has a mandate to coordinate with its allies of the United States in an effort to better understand the nature of and extent of UAP. So when those conversations are had, what are you going to be able to offer and contribute to the conversation? It sounds like absolutely nothing because you haven't investigated the topic since 1996. Your position is in stark contrast to that of the United States. And I would say it's an uninformed position based on the fact that you haven't even sought information from the US as it pertains to UAP. So that's a good segue into this next document is also an important one because it represents probably the most important document that has come from or ministerial correspondence that was provided to a private citizen. So this document is from last year. It's from the Deputy Prime Minister and current Minister for Defence, the Honourable Richard Marles. Glenn Sampson had actually reached out to me and was asking for some guidance on how he can engage his elected representatives. And to his credit, he did. He reached out to his Senator Katie Gallagher in Canberra, who subsequently forwarded his correspondence onto the Minister for Defence. And the response letter that Glenn Sampson received was, this line is key. The United States approach to UAP, including its international engagement, is a matter for the United States. Well, yes, but it's not only a matter for the United States. The United States have indicated on numerous occasions that UAP is not an issue that's isolated to the United States. It is an issue that affects many other countries as well. As a close partner and ally, Australia and the United States consult regularly on a range of shared security and strategic interests. Well, you've just made it blatantly obvious that UAP is not a shared security and strategic interest when it certainly should be, because Australia has been lockstep with the United States on almost every other defense issue, with the exception of this one. And I, for the life of me, don't understand why. So allow me to now make a case for why the Royal Australian Air Force and the Department of Defence is absolutely hypocritical when it comes to the UAP topic. And here is another video that I want to show you that highlights this.
Any briefings from the UAP task force or the Pentagon in relation to this issue in recent months?
No, Senator.
Has any defence attaches had any?
Senator, we were briefed on the recent incidents that were related to the shoot down of what has been attributed to China's balloon that was over the United States of America. We don't know if we were one of the 40 nations that were referred to in the press briefing, but we have been briefed by the US, and we have sought additional information from them through the the Air Attaché in Washington.
So specifically in relation to the Chinese surveillance balloon or spy balloon or whatever you want to call it, what about the three other the three other?
We've sought information in
objects?
relation to those 4 incidents, yes, Senator.
Okay, and why have you sought information in relation to those?
Because we would like to know what the source of the unidentified object is. We would like to know what the identity of it is, and we would like to know how the US has responded to it, so that if we had something similar in our airspace, then we can take advantage of the learning from that.
So this is where I get very confused. So the Royal Australian Air Force has come to the determination that UAP are likely to be one of those 3 things: human-made technologies, and that UAP could be other nation systems, either contemporary or advanced. So based on what you just stated there publicly in February of this year, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, you've just indicated that the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects that the US Air Force brought down were more than likely to be prosaic in nature. Could be human-made technologies or other nation systems, which we certainly know the Chinese spy balloon was. So why then have you sought information via the air attaché in Washington, D.C.? You've sought information and a briefing on the origin of the intent of those particular objects, but not UAP. I don't understand the hypocrisy there. You won't touch UAP, which you've indicated are more than likely human-made technologies and other nation systems, but you won't touch the subject, even though the Minister for Defence has stated that, well, UAP is an issue for the United States. We share security and strategic issues, but this is not one of them. How can you justify that position? You've sought information on those particular instances, which in your eyes are UAP, but you're not actually seeking a briefing or information on UAP more broadly. And I just do not understand that mindset. It's so hypocritical in nature. You just will not touch UAP if it potentially falls outside of the scope of these 3 things that you've determined it is, without having been privy to any of the classified data that the US has looked at. Furthermore, we know that in May of this year, there was a Five Eyes forum on UAP. I had submitted a request following Kirkpatrick's revelation of a Five Eyes forum, requesting clarification on Australia's position on UAP. And more importantly, Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes forum on UAP. So if they didn't attend, who did attend? That's what I want to know. But what's even more interesting is only a year prior to that correspondence, I had received other correspondence from the Royal Australian Air Force making this statement. Let me zoom on in so you can see it there. I'd asked the question, is Five Eyes the appropriate forum? Australia being a Five Eyes partner of the United States, is that the appropriate forum for UAP to be discussed? The Five Eyes is an intelligence alliance comprising of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the United States. Air Force does not lead on these forums. Fair enough. Air Force does not consider this the appropriate platform to discuss the topic of UAP or UFO. And only a year later, you have a Five Eyes forum on UAP. Interesting. Funny that. I recently had the opportunity to interview Ross Coulthart, Bill Chalker, and Ross was kindly able to provide his thoughts on why Australia should be taking the issue of UAP seriously when it's clearly obvious that they're not.
It is a huge issue for Australia, and I've spoken myself to defence personnel as recently as last weekend who sought me out and wanted to discuss with me sightings that they have had which concern them, which they feel they cannot report to their superiors, because if they do so, they're worried that they're going to be the subject of an adverse finding on their flight their flight record. And the reaction, frankly, of Senator Wong there, who should really know better, you know, she tried to use that pejorative of, oh, is this a UFO question? And it was an attempt to basically insinuate that this is such a puerile thing to be raising, that the time of the committee should not be spent delving into it. I mean, it's just crazy to me at a time when the Congress is passing legislation talking about flight safety and national security issues posed by UAPs, talking about NHI's non-human intelligence, and talking about the search for retrieved non-human technology. It gobsmacks me that we have a foreign minister that has their head so firmly in the sand on this issue. It's appalling, frankly, and same goes with the Defence Department bosses as well.
You could not put it better than that, essentially. I wanted to get his thoughts on Australia's potential involvement in the Five Eyes foreign material program as it pertains to UAP. And again, he was able to provide some commentary, which I found particularly interesting.
And I've had conversations with senior people in Defence who've actually rung me. I also had a conversation with somebody in a minister's office about this recently. They were asking me for my advice because they'd heard about the Larry Maguire letter, which mentions the AUKUS agreement. He's a Canadian MP who raised with the Canadian Defence Minister allegations of a crash retrieval program that Canadian scientists are allegedly working on with the US in Canada. And whilst it's been a very qualified and careful and, how does one say this, slippery denial from the Canadian Defence Ministry, I'm pretty confident that there is something to the fact that Canada is working with US scientists on a crash retrieval program. And it does have implications for AUKUS. This is why it matters to Australia, because we're spending the most money in history on any kind of procurement. We're spending $400 billion, and it'll probably be well in excess of that, on attack nuclear submarines from the United States. What if it turns out that after we've signed these contracts, it's revealed by the US that it's fooled its ally and that it's working on technology that would supersede that technology by thousands of years? What if it turns out that the United States has developed propulsive techniques that they're not revealing to even its Five Eyes allies? That's why they need to be upfront. That's why, frankly, if I was Australia, I would be demanding answers behind the scenes. I would be asking. And that's why Larry Maguire, the Canadian MP, in his letter to Anand, the Canadian Defence Minister, raised this as an AUKUS issue, because he said it. He knew that it was a concern that would be raised by other members of AUKUS.
And to that point, Ross, do you have any knowledge of Australia's involvement in the Five Eyes foreign material program as it pertains to UAP?
I've spoken to Australians, ex-special forces, who tell me that they've been involved in a crash retrieval, period.
Within Australia or in or abroad?
I can't comment. Yeah.
I understand. I wanted to see how far you'd want to go on that one. So there you go. Claims of potential Australian involvement in crash retrievals of UAP. Wow, I would love to learn more about that in the months to come. Hopefully, we get some more information in due course. But Ross makes an incredibly valid point there that if AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, US trilateral alliance, that's, Australia is purchasing 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines, and if we're getting duds, if we're buying duds and spending, $400 billion on technology that's going to be superseded by some exotic form of propulsion that the US has in its hands, along with Canada, due to back engineering of downed UAP, then Five Eyes members like Australia are going to be pretty pissed and have egg on their face and have a lot to answer for when Australian taxpayers ask questions if there is some form of disclosure or confirmation from the United States that the US has been operating these legacy programs. So I think Australia like Ross said, needs to ask some really key questions. And before they do that, get off their ass and take the topic seriously and treat it with the respect that it deserves as a national security issue and safety of flight risk. Now, as we look ahead, if we try and look into our crystal ball and have some future vision, well, we know that the Five Eyes Forum on UAP that took place in May was a first of its kind. ARO is legislatively mandated to coordinate with and engage its allies on the UAP topic. So I would say it is a very safe bet that there will be future engagement across the Five Eyes on the UAP issue. So you would want to hope that Australia is going to be able to bring something to the party, bring something to the table, if ARO is going to be asking for information and data that Australia has collected, not just historically, but to present day. So what will Australia's representation and involvement in those discussions look like? That's anyone's guess. So how can we, as Australian citizens and taxpayers, try and push the conversation forward, move it along? Well, I have taken it upon myself over the last 2 years to engage my elected representatives on this topic and try and elevate the conversation within government. And I've had frequent engagement with, as I mentioned, Senator Wish Wilson, and providing him with updates, keeping him apprised of what's happening in the United States so that it can help inform the line of questioning, his lines of inquiry when he is at Senate estimates asking questions of defense leadership. And you can do the same. I would encourage you, if you take this topic seriously and you want your elected representative that is serving your interests to also take it seriously, get in touch with them, write them a letter, give them a call, send them an email, tweet at them, just engage them and highlight the importance of this topic. And you want to know why there is such a disparity between Australia's position on this topic with the United States, our closest ally, Five Eyes and AUKUS partner. That's first and foremost. You can engage your representatives on this topic. If you wish, you can also try and engage the legacy media. Unfortunately, the Australian news media is also very lackluster in covering this topic. They'll always play the X-Files theme at the front end of every segment, which we're past that point. You know, get over taking the piss out of this topic. It needs to be taken seriously, just like it is in the United States, and the scientific and academic community in the United States take it seriously as well. Earlier this year, and I'll close on this, I followed the lead of our brothers and sisters across the pond in the UK. There had been a petition put forward to have the UK government establish or implement an investigatory body on UAP. So I decided, well, why not do the same thing in Australia? So I submitted a petition to the Australian House of Representatives for a formal review of unidentified anomalous phenomena. And to my surprise, we had 759 signatures captured, which I was absolutely stoked with. So the petition has been presented, and the petition, I won't read through it, but we essentially we asked the House to conduct a formal review of unidentified anomalous phenomena and consider the establishment of an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose. Because there is currently a gaping hole in the domain awareness for the Australian Department of Defence. And we know that because that's exactly the same issue that our brothers and sisters across the pond had in the United States. Need I remind you of this commentary that came out from the United States earlier this year?
I will tell you that we did not detect those threats, and that's a domain awareness gap that we have to figure out. But I don't want to go into further detail.
So Australia has a domain awareness gap that it needs to address. And hopefully this petition, which is currently sitting with the Minister for Defence, he has an obligation to respond to the petition within 90 days that it was presented to the House of Representatives. So hopefully I'll have some, be nice to have some good news to share, but hopefully I'll have some commentary that I can share for those that are interested to learn how that petition advances. So I hope this presentation has been of interest. Again, just to kind of hit home, I know I've gone probably well over my allocated time, but to kind of give you a sense as to there are a lot of folks in Australia that take this topic seriously and want it to be all we Aussies want is we want the issue of UAP to be acknowledged by the Australian government and the Australian Department of Defence. We want it to be acknowledged, we want it to be investigated, and we want a conclusion reached as to what UAP are. That is all we want, starting with a formal acknowledgement of this issue, and then we can go from there. So again, thank you for your attendance. I hope this virtual presentation has been of interest and of value. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you're interested in following my journey on the UAP topic, I would certainly encourage you to subscribe to the Unexplained Rundown at your leisure. So on that note, I'll leave you with this.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.